Let's go to our panel now. In Paris, we have Marc Porter, who's a special advisor to Mali's government. And in London is Paul Melly. He's a journalist who focuses on Africa and a consulting fellow at Chatham House. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program. Just to let you know, we had a couple of guests lined up from Bamako. The internet connection was terrible. Unfortunately, we cannot proceed with them and they can't join the panel. That's unfortunate, but let's continue nonetheless. Mark, is this government in denial about the fact that this is inter-ethnic violence, and the president's come out and said it's not?
Well, I think what the president means is that it's more complex than it might appear. One of the problems with the inter-ethnic conflict is that it's being funded and financed and supplied by outside groups. These groups, the ethnic groups, have been living side by side for hundreds, perhaps 1,000 years, and they've never had any problems. Suddenly, just like it happened back in 2010 before the 2012 coup, we have a lot of the fighters that are coming from places where they're losing, such as in Syria, such as in the Middle East. This seems to be repeating itself, and this is a problem. The other thing that's important to know is that the Malian troops, the army troops themselves, are hesitant to fire their own citizens. So this is a restraint that should be applauded in that particular sense, that they do not want to abuse human rights and they do want to work together. Now, of course, the violence is escalating and this creates a bit of a problem, but I believe that's what the president was trying to say.
Paul Melly, is that what the president was trying to say? It is inter-ethnic, but it's being fueled and exacerbated by foreign fighters and problems that had nothing to do with Mali.
Well, even though there may well be some intercommunal or even interethnic factors that partly relate to this, he has to be very careful in his choice of words, because we've seen some very, very angry statements by community leaders over the last few months in Mali. We've seen protests, for example, by members of the Pearl, the Fulani ethnic group, saying that they are being victimized. And equally, we've had very strong words from leaders of the Dogon community in central Mali, basically saying that they are being targeted by extremists among the Pearl. So when you've got these very heated words being used, and already people are putting identity politics out in the public arena, it's quite important for the president not to inflame that.
Right.
Whatever his private analysis may be, he needs to appear statesmanlike and just focus on the question of saying, we are all Malians and we must resolve this together.
Okay. Marc Porter, 3 months ago, there was a claim that it was the former prime minister's fault. Therefore, a new cabinet, a new prime minister will sort it out. The killings are still continuing. So can we say that that theory doesn't work? It wasn't the former prime minister's fault?
Well, again, these issues are quite complex. One of the reasons, as the president said, for reshuffling the cabinet and providing a new government is because he wanted it to be more inclusive. And they did go from 20-something ministers to, I think, up to 37 ministers now. So the cabinet certainly is much more inclusive. This does take some time to work itself out. And as the government is trying to organize itself to respond to all of these problems, you do have the communities who want faster action. So that is a dilemma for the government. But we do see progress from the government in terms of the teacher strike is now over. They were working very heavily on these types of issues too. And they are organizing the new government to respond to these things. And this is what they're doing at the moment.
Here's what I don't fully get, Mark. So there are foreign peacekeepers. There are about 20,000 foreign soldiers, if you add the UN and the French as well. But they can't seem to stop the bloodshed. Why?
Well, there are two foreign operations there now, as you pointed out. One, the French operation, Barkhane, and then you had the United Nations MINUSA operations. But these operations are well defined, and these operations are not allowed to go outside the scope and the protocols of which they are assigned. So this is also a problem for the government and the Army. The Army is pretty much left to deal with these sorts of local types of issues. To bring in the two other foreign operations is quite difficult and takes some time. And as we see with these attacks, they happen very quickly.
Right. So just to be clear, you could have thousands of foreign peacekeepers who are stationed nearby, ready, willing, capable, but they're told they can't get involved if there are reports of Dogon and Fulani communities killing each other.
Well, that's very specific, what you've said. What's actually happening is that in order for the foreign troops to operate outside of their mandates, outside of the protocols, they do have to get permission, and those permissions have to go through certain hierarchies and certain protocols themselves, and that does take time. That's how these operations were set up in order to protect the sovereignty of the Republic of Mali. Now, what's interesting here is that a lot of the Malian army troops that would like to respond are often too far away. It doesn't look very far away on the map, but if you've been down there, it is quite far in terms of the time to get from one place, especially the army bases, to where these events are happening. Also, there tends to be a lag in reporting what's happening, and that is something that is interesting in the communications of responding to these emergencies. But this is another reason why the Republic of Mali has asked for a lot of support in terms of updating their transport, because transport's a big problem because of the infrastructure being so underdeveloped.
So has the government requested that the mandate of the UN peacekeepers and the French troops gets expanded and extended so that they can help sort this out in Mopti region?
We were at the United Nations. I was at the Security Council with Prime Minister Mega and also the new Prime Minister Sisse at the Security Council, where the Security Council members were asking for an update on what is happening to renew their mandate. One of the issues for Mali is to keep the mandate in place as it is. Asking for additional support is even further. But we did meet with John Bolton and with Mike Pompeo in Washington to ask for further support too. While the French are doing a very good job considering their mandate, and so is the UN, there is additional support that could be used, and these are some of the things that the president and the current government is looking at.
Okay, so Paul, is the current mandate shackling the ability of these foreign troops to actually make a difference and stop the bloodshed?
Well, the difficulty is that when the two forces were originally deployed, the Barkhane force, that's the French troops, which is 5,000 troops deployed across the whole of the Sahel, so several countries, not just Mali, and then the MINUSMA force, which is about 13,000 UN peacekeepers. At the time, those two forces were mandated and designed to tackle the situation in the north of Mali that came after the French intervention in 2013 to end jihadist control of towns in the north. And so the role that was then envisaged was that MINUSMA, the peacekeeping force, would be working on trying to create a climate for reconciliation between communities in that northern space in terms of, for example, the Tuareg separatist movement vis-a-vis other Tuaregs who didn't believe in separatism. And the mandate of the French was really to focus on anti-terrorism activities, so quite proactive military operations to try and hunt down jihadists in the Sahara particularly. So the central Malian situation and the crisis and the challenges that are imposed there are rather different. So already the French have moved some troops to the edge of the center, into the north of the center, if you like, and they're trying to shift to much more of a sort of peace-building, hearts and minds operation. But of course, they were originally tasked with something quite different in the far north. And one of the challenges for the UN force, for MINUSMA, is that MINUSMA is, of course, made up of troops drawn from contributing countries around the world. And many of those troops have been sent essentially trained and equipped for a peacekeeping operation and not for the different type of operation that might be needed in the center of Mali. And so retraining them or re-equipping them is a huge challenge. And then you also have the problem of force protection. People often complain that a lot of the MINUSMA forces are preoccupied with defending MINUSMA against terrorist attacks. But then you look at the death toll. MINUSMA has the highest death toll of any UN peacekeeping operation in the entire world. It's the most dangerous United Nations operation anywhere on the planet. And in that context, again, recalibrating it, shifting what it can do, whether it's under a changed mandate or within the present mandate, is really difficult. And especially when everyone realizes that a lot of the problems in central Mali also need to be tackled through community dialogue, through political initiatives, that type of thing.
Right. Okay. So Mark, as has been mentioned as well by Paul, the UN peacekeepers do come under attack. They are ambush attacks and so on. So maybe that reduces the appetite to get more deeply involved. Is this government facing two impossibilities? Because if you solve the root causes of one, or if you at least solve one aspect of it, you smash the quote-unquote jihadis or those linked to them, right? And you win the hearts and minds of people and they don't go and join Al-Qaeda in the Sahel and so on. You're still left with the thing that has been unearthed in the past few months, which is the fights over grazing corridors and grazing rights and the anger between the Fulani and Dogon. So you still have to solve that other one. Or if you solve the issue between the Fulani and Dogon, you still have the jihadist problems. Can you actually do both at the same time?
Well, they have to. And as you rightfully pointed out, there are multiple problems coming from this. The economic problem seems to be the foundational problem, as you correctly pointed out. Grazing lands and water access, which we are working on different types of development projects to help with this. Many people in Mali believe that the underlying cause is really economic. We solve the economic problem, then the other problems tend to be more manageable. So the government now has a national strategic plan which has three poles. There is the economic development pole, there is the social welfare pole, and there's the defense pole. So working on all three of these poles in the national strategy have to be done together. Defense, of course, is probably the most urgent, and that does take resources away from the other ones. So working on all three of these at the same time, it's not impossible. It could be done. It just the government needs all the resources possible to help it get this accomplished.
So, Paul, if it is economic at the heart of it all, does Mali need more foreign help, whether through the AU or other such larger institutions, to help its economy to solve everything at the roots?
Well, one of the problems is that Mali, like Niger, like Burkina Faso, is situated in the Sahel. That means that it is a very vulnerable environment. The rainy season only lasts for 3 months of the year, and there is a regular risk of drought, for example, and climate change is making the pattern of rainfall and drought less predictable, which means that it is harder for farmers to reliably plant crops, or for pastoralists, for animal herders, to know when the grazing will be in the places they expect. And so you've got that fundamental underlying challenge. You've got deep social problems. You've got a high birth rate. You've got a situation where, not just because of security problems, but also because Mali is a poor country, the presence of the state is often quite thin. The capacity of the state to provide public services in the present unstable conditions has been made even more difficult because, for example, you get trade unions recommending that their public sector members should refuse to go to areas that are insecure. You get government officials who feel unable to travel in government vehicles for routine meetings about agriculture or food security because they're afraid they will be targeted. So you've got a very complex and insecure situation which is making it really difficult to tackle these profound development challenges. And of course, the development challenges then feed the insecurity, because you get, for example, people, young men who have not got a viable livelihood, and you can't do much to create the viable livelihood unless you can get the development. But of course, the development won't happen if the insecurity persists. So it's a really very complex and overlapping set of problems.
Complex problems, monumental task ahead for the government and everybody else who wants to stop the trouble in Mali. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. I've got to move on, but Marc Porter and Paul Melly, thanks so much. And once again, very unfortunate that our guests within Mali couldn't make it to the discussion because our internet connection with them was just so poor. But thanks again.